Ethan Caldwell first met Lenara Zhou on a Tuesday that felt like any other. The hospital lobby smelled of disinfectant and coffee, and he'd been there consulting with Dr. Marcus Hale about a research paper when he noticed her, small frame, pallid skin, struggling with an 4-pole near the pharmacy window. She dropped her prescription bag, and he helped her retrieve it. "Thank you," she'd whispered, her voice barely audible. "I'm sorry. I'm always dropping things lately." Ethan noticed the tremor in her hands, the way she steadied herself against the wall. "Are you all right? Do you need help getting to your car?" "I took the bus," she said, attempting a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'll be fine. I'm used to it." That moment planted a seed. Something about her quiet resignation, the way she seemed to carry her burden alone, stayed with him. 3 weeks later, they met again at the same hospital. Then again. Each time, Lenara appeared weaker, more vulnerable. She mentioned chronic anemia, unexplained fatigue, frequent dizzy spells that the doctors couldn't quite explain despite numerous tests. Ethan, who'd inherited his late father's exceptional aptitude for absorbing medical knowledge through rigorous study and pattern recognition, found himself drawn to her condition as much as her quiet demeanor. His father had been a physician who died when Ethan was 19, but not before instilling in him a methodical approach to learning, breaking complex systems into manageable patterns, cross-referencing symptoms with mechanisms, building knowledge architectures that most people took years to develop. Ethan had pursued finance instead of medicine, but the cognitive framework remained. "You shouldn't be walking alone after treatment," he told her during their fourth encounter, this time finding her in the hospital cafe, staring at untouched soup. She looked up, surprised. "I remember you. The prescription bag." "Ethan," he said, extending his hand. "Lenara." Her handshake was weak, her palm cold. "I appreciate the concern, but really, I'm managing." "Managing doesn't mean you should have to do it alone," he replied, surprising himself with the directness. She studied him for a long moment, something vulnerable and hopeful flickering across her features. "Most people get tired of the hospital routine pretty quickly. The cancelled plans, the uncertainty. It's not exactly attractive." "Then most people don't understand what matters," Ethan said simply. That conversation marked the beginning. Within weeks, they were exchanging messages, first about her appointments, then about books, music, the small observations that build intimacy. Lenara was intelligent, well-read, with a dry sense of humor that emerged when she felt well enough to engage. She worked remotely as a copy editor, a job that accommodated her unpredictable health. "It's perfect for someone like me," she explained one evening over dinner at her apartment, a modest one-bedroom filled with books and plants she apologized for neglecting. "I can work from bed when I need to. No one expects me to show up looking functional." 6 months into their relationship, Ethan realized he'd become Lenara's primary caretaker without quite noticing the transition. She had good days and bad days, but the bad days always seemed to coincide with moments when his attention drifted elsewhere: a work conference in Singapore, dinner with colleagues he hadn't seen in months, a weekend visiting his mother in Portland. The Singapore trip had been particularly difficult. He'd been gone for 4 days, and on the third night, Lenara called from the hospital. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said, her voice weak. "But they're keeping me overnight. My hemoglobin dropped again. They're talking about transfusions." Ethan had cut the conference short, losing an important networking opportunity. When he arrived at the hospital the next morning, exhausted from the 15-hour flight, Lenara was sitting up in bed, pale but apologetic. "You shouldn't have come back early," she said, though her eyes betrayed relief. "I would have been fine." "I wanted to be here," he replied, taking her hand. The pattern repeated. A friend's wedding in Boston, Lenara experienced severe chest pains the morning he was supposed to leave. A promotion opportunity that would have required occasional travel, she collapsed during a video call, prompting an ambulance. Each time, Ethan adjusted his priorities, reshaping his life around her unpredictable needs. His mother noticed during one of their weekly phone calls. "You sound tired, honey," Margaret Caldwell said, her tone careful. "How are things really going?" "Fine. Busy. Lenara's been having a rough week." "She's been having rough weeks since you met her," his mother observed. "I'm not saying she's not genuinely ill, but, are you taking care of yourself too?" "Mom, she doesn't have anyone else. Her parents are in Shanghai, and they're not exactly supportive about the health issues. She needs stability. And you need a partner, not a patient, Margaret said gently. There's a difference, Ethan. He brushed off the concern then, but it lingered. Was he being a supportive partner or enabling something unhealthy? The question felt disloyal even to consider. One evening, as he sat beside her hospital bed during another emergency admission, her fourth that quarter, she said something that lodged in his mind like a splinter. You know, I think you feel guilty, Lenara said softly, her fingers weak around his. About that woman from before. The one who really hurt you. Ethan frowned, pulled from his thoughts about work emails he needed to send. What woman? The one you told me about. Rebecca. The one who made you think you loved her, then just left. You said you felt manipulated, like she'd played a role to get what she wanted. He had mentioned Rebecca once, months ago, a brief relationship that ended poorly after she'd admitted she'd been seeing someone else the entire time. But Lenara's version felt different, heavier, as if she'd rewritten the narrative into something darker. I don't think I said manipulated, Ethan replied carefully, trying to recall the exact conversation. I said it was dishonest. That she'd wasted my time. Maybe you didn't use that word, Lenara conceded, but I could tell. You blamed yourself for falling for someone who didn't really care. You kept questioning your judgment, wondering how you missed the signs. I think that's why you're so careful with me, so attentive. But I'm different, Ethan. I actually need you. This isn't a game or a manipulation. My body is failing me, and you're the only person who hasn't given up. The statement should have felt reassuring, but something about it unsettled him. The way she'd reframed his past, adding emotional weight he didn't remember feeling. The subtle implication that his care was rooted in guilt rather than genuine affection. I'm here because I want to be, he said firmly. Not because I'm trying to correct some past mistake. She smiled, squeezing his hand. I know. I'm sorry. I'm just scared sometimes that you'll realize you don't actually want this, the hospitals, the uncertainty, all of it. That you'll wake up one day and understand you deserve better. You are better, he insisted, pushing away the nagging doubt. The first real inconsistency came 3 months later. Ethan had accompanied Lenara to an appointment with a new specialist, Dr. Marcus Hale, who'd taken over her case after a previous physician retired. Marcus was thorough, asking detailed questions about symptom progression, reviewing years of medical records with the kind of attention Ethan appreciated. Afterward, Marcus pulled him aside in the hallway. Can I speak with you privately? They stepped into an empty consultation room. Marcus, normally measured and professional, looked uncomfortable. I reviewed Lenara's records from her previous providers, Marcus began, choosing his words carefully. There are gaps. Test results that should show progressive deterioration but instead show normal ranges. Admissions logged without corresponding physician notes. Treatments prescribed that don't align with documented symptoms. It's unusual. Ethan felt something cold settle in his chest. What are you suggesting? I'm not suggesting anything yet, Marcus said carefully. But I think we need more comprehensive testing. A full workup from scratch, without relying on previous diagnoses. With your permission, and Lenara's consent, I'd like to run a complete metabolic panel, cardiac workup, neurological evaluation. I want to either confirm what we think we know or find what we might be missing. You think the previous doctors got it wrong? I think information is incomplete, Marcus replied diplomatically. And before we continue treatment, I want a complete picture. Ethan went home that night and, for the first time, looked through Lenara's medical documents himself, the thick folder she kept in her desk, organized chronologically. His father's legacy, that rare cognitive gift that allowed him to absorb and synthesize complex information rapidly, served him now in ways he wished it wouldn't. He spread the documents across the dining table, lab reports, discharge summaries, prescription histories. Cross-referenced dates with his own calendar, marking the timeline of their relationship. The pattern that emerged wasn't one of chronic illness with predictable progression. It was one of carefully timed relapses, symptoms that appeared primarily when witnessed by medical professionals or by him, and recoveries that defied medical logic. May 15, emergency admission for chest pain and shortness of breath. Tests showed no cardiac abnormality. Discharged after 48 hours. This was 2 days before his planned trip to Portland. June 22, severe anemia requiring transfusion. But the previous week's lab work showed hemoglobin within normal range. The drop was precipitous, unexplained. This coincided with his company's annual retreat. August 3, collapse during a video call. Ambulance transport. No neurological findings, no definitive explanation. He'd been on the phone with a recruiter about a position in Seattle. The hospital visits increased after arguments. The weakness intensified when he mentioned plans that didn't include her. The emergency admissions clustered around dates when he'd been distant or preoccupied with work. Ethan sat back, staring at the papers. His analytical mind, trained to spot patterns in financial data, now identified a different kind of trend. One that made his stomach turn. He thought about the Rebecca narrative, how Lenara had gradually convinced him he'd been manipulated before, even though his actual memory of that relationship was simply disappointment, not trauma. How she'd planted seeds of doubt about his judgment, making him second-guess his instincts. Was he second-guessing them now? Was this analysis just paranoia, the product of exhaustion and stress? Or was he finally seeing clearly? 2 weeks later, Dr. Hale called him into his office. On the desk lay a thick folder, the results of the comprehensive testing. The panel came back, Marcus said quietly, gesturing for Ethan to sit. There's no physiological basis for the symptoms she's been reporting. No anemia, no metabolic disorder, no chronic condition that would explain the pattern of illness. In fact, she's remarkably healthy for someone who's supposedly been chronically ill for years. Ethan stared at the papers, his mind cataloging every hospital visit, every cancelled plan, every moment of guilt when he'd prioritized her needs above everything else. There's more, Marcus continued, his voice heavy with professional discomfort. Some of the medications in her records, medications she claimed were prescribed by her previous physician, would actually induce the symptoms she's been experiencing if taken unnecessarily or in manipulated doses. Particularly the iron supplements combined with certain diuretics. The combination could create the appearance of anemia cycles while actually causing them. You're saying she made herself sick? I'm saying the medical evidence doesn't support chronic illness, and some of the symptom patterns suggest possible factitious behavior, Marcus said carefully. I spoke with her previous physician, the one who retired. Dr. Sarah Chen. She was willing to discuss the case given the circumstances. Lenara was discharged from their care 2 years ago after concerns about inconsistencies. They documented suspicions that she was manufacturing or exaggerating symptoms to maintain medical attention, but they couldn't prove it definitively. Dr. Chen recommended psychiatric evaluation, which Lenara refused. The term hung in the air. Ethan knew it from his father's medical journals, factitious disorder, sometimes called Munchausen syndrome. A psychological condition where someone fabricates or induces illness to assume the sick role. Not malicious deception for financial gain, but pathological need for care, attention, the validation of being cared for. Where does this leave us legally? Ethically? Ethan asked, his voice hollow. She hasn't broken any laws, Marcus replied. But she needs psychiatric help, not medical treatment. And you need to decide how to proceed. I can't in good conscience continue treating her for conditions that don't exist. I'll recommend a psychiatrist who specializes in these cases, but the decision to pursue that has to be hers. Ethan drove home in a daze, Marcus's words echoing. The past year replayed in his mind, every rushed return from a trip, every rearranged priority, every moment he'd felt guilty for wanting something outside their relationship. Not because she was genuinely ill, but because she'd created an elaborate theater of illness to keep him bound to her. The anger came later, after the shock wore off. Not explosive rage, but cold, analytical fury at the manipulation. She'd stolen time, opportunities, peace of mind. She'd rewritten his memories, made him doubt his judgment, constructed a reality where he was perpetually in debt to her needs. But underneath the anger was something more complicated, a kind of grief. Because he had loved her. The parts of her that were real, her intelligence, her humor on good days, her vulnerability, he'd loved those parts. But how much of it had been real? How much had been performance? Ethan didn't confront Lenara immediately. Instead, he waited until she was discharged from her latest episode, a bout of dizziness and weakness that had landed her in observation for 3 days, during which every test came back normal. He brought her home, made her comfortable on the couch, brought her water and the anxiety medication Marcus had prescribed for what he now understood was the real condition. Then he sat across from her in their living room, the medical folder on the coffee table between them. "I spoke with Dr. Hale about your test results," he began, keeping his voice level. "All of them. The comprehensive panel." Lenara's expression shifted, first confusion, then something like fear flickering across her features. "What did he say?" "That there's no medical explanation for your symptoms. That your previous physician had concerns about how your symptoms presented, about inconsistencies in your medical history." He paused, watching her carefully. "He also mentioned factitious disorder. Do you know what that is?" Her face drained of color, genuine pallor this time, not the theatrical weakness he'd come to recognize. "Ethan, I need you to tell me the truth," he interrupted, his voice still calm but firm. "All of it. No more stories, no more reframing. Just truth. Did you make yourself sick? Did you fake the symptoms?" For a long moment, she said nothing. He could see the calculation behind her eyes, the weighing of options. Then something broke, her shoulders sagged, her composure cracked like thin ice. "I was scared," she whispered, tears spilling over. "When we met, you were this brilliant, kind man, and I thought if you really got to know me, if you saw me as I actually am, just ordinary and unremarkable, you'd leave. Everyone leaves eventually. My parents basically exiled me when I didn't live up to their expectations. My ex before you left when I stopped being interesting. So I made myself necessary. Someone you couldn't leave because I needed you. By pretending to be sick." "It wasn't all pretending," she said desperately, reaching for justification. "I do feel anxious sometimes. I do get panic attacks that feel like real physical symptoms. But I made it worse. I took iron supplements inconsistently to create the anemia cycles. I skipped meals before appointments so I'd look pale, seem weak. I exaggerated symptoms. I told myself it was just insurance, just making sure you'd stay long enough to see I was worth staying for." The admission hung in the air, ugly and raw. "And Rebecca?" Ethan asked quietly. "The narrative about me being manipulated by her, about my guilt and damaged judgment." Lenara looked away, shame coloring her features. "I needed you to believe you'd already made that mistake once. That you'd already been fooled by someone who didn't really need you. So you'd be more careful, more committed to getting it right with me. If you thought you had a pattern of bad judgment, you'd try harder not to repeat it. So you gaslit me," Ethan said flatly. "You took a normal breakup and rewrote my memory of it to make me doubt myself." "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "I'm so sorry. I know it was wrong. I know I'm sick, but not the way I told you. I need help, real help, and I'm scared of what happens if I get it because then I'll just be me, and that's never been enough." Ethan felt the weight of her words, the genuine terror underneath the manipulation. This wasn't a villain revealing their master plan. This was a damaged person who'd used the only tools they thought they had to secure love. But that understanding didn't erase the harm. "You're right that you need help," he said quietly. "Real psychiatric help. Dr. Hale can recommend someone. But I can't be the person who provides it anymore. Not like this. Are you leaving me?" The question came out small, childlike. "I don't know yet," he admitted. "I need time to process this. To figure out what's real and what was theater. You stole a year of my life, Lenara. You made me feel guilty for having needs, for wanting anything outside of taking care of you. That's not love. That's not partnership. I do love you," she insisted. "That part was real." "Maybe," Ethan replied. "But love without honesty is just another form of manipulation. And I can't tell the difference anymore." The days that followed were strange and heavy. Lenara agreed to see a psychiatrist, Dr. Rebecca Winters, who specialized in attachment disorders and factitious behavior. Ethan moved into the guest room, not out of anger but out of necessity. He needed space to process what he'd learned, to separate his genuine feelings from the conditioning of the past year. His mother called 2 days after the confrontation. "You sound different," Margaret observed. "What happened?" He told her everything. The medical records, the pattern recognition, the confession. When he finished, his mother was quiet for a long moment. "How do you feel?" she finally asked. "Angry. Betrayed. Confused. Guilty for feeling angry because she clearly needs help." "You can feel all those things at once," his mother said gently. "She does need help, but that doesn't erase what she did to you. Compassion doesn't require martyrdom, sweetheart." "I don't know if I can forgive this," he admitted. "She didn't just lie about being sick. She reconstructed my reality. She made me question my own memories, my judgment. How do I trust anything now?" "You start small," Margaret replied. "You trust what you can verify. You trust your own analysis. You trusted your instincts enough to investigate, didn't you? That counts for something." Therapy helped. His own therapist, Dr. Michael Santos, who specialized in trauma and relational dynamics. In their sessions, Ethan began to untangle the complicated knot of his feelings. "I think part of what hurts most," he said during one session, "is that I really did care about her. The person I thought I knew, her intelligence, her dry humor, the way she saw the world, I loved those parts. But now I don't know how much of it was real." "Probably more than you think," Dr. Santos suggested. "People with factitious disorder aren't entirely fabricating their personalities. The illness behavior is a maladaptive coping mechanism, but the core person exists underneath. The question is whether that person can exist in relationship without the coping mechanism. And whether I can be in relationship with her knowing what she's capable of," Ethan added. "That's the harder question," Dr. Santos agreed. "Trust, once broken this fundamentally, takes years to rebuild. And it requires consistent, sustained effort from both people. You need to decide if you're willing to invest that time and emotional energy, knowing there are no guarantees." Meanwhile, Lenara was doing her own work. Dr. Winters was direct in her approach, refusing to let Lenara minimize or rationalize the behavior. "You didn't just seek attention," Dr. Winters told her during one of their joint sessions that Ethan agreed to attend. "You systematically manipulated someone's perception of reality to control their behavior. That's abuse, even if it came from a place of fear rather than malice." Lenara flinched at the word abuse but didn't argue. "I know. I'm trying to understand why I thought that was acceptable. Why I thought love had to be secured through need rather than choice." "Tell me about your parents," Dr. Winters prompted. The story that emerged was one Ethan had only heard fragments of before. Lenara's parents were high-achieving academics who'd immigrated from Shanghai to provide better opportunities. But their love came with conditions: excellent grades, prestigious achievements, compliance with their vision of success. When Lenara chose creative writing over medical school, they'd withdrawn not just financial support but emotional presence. She'd spent her 20s trying to earn her way back into their approval, eventually realizing it was impossible. "So you learned that love had to be earned through performance," Dr. Winters observed. "And that the performance had to be something that made you indispensable, something that created obligation." "Being sick worked in college," Lenara admitted quietly. "My roommate took care of me during a bad flu, and for those 2 weeks, someone actually prioritized my needs. It felt safe. Unconditional, even though I know now it wasn't." "And you've been chasing that feeling ever since," Dr. Winters said. "But manufactured crisis isn't the same as genuine care. It's a transaction masquerading as love." Listening to this, Ethan felt his anger begin to shift toward something more complex. Understanding didn't mean forgiveness, but it provided context. Lenara wasn't a monster. She was someone who'd learned destructive patterns and never questioned them until forced to confront the consequences. 3 months after the confrontation, Lenara had made tangible progress. Dr. Winters reported genuine engagement with treatment. Lenara was learning to identify the triggers that prompted illness behavior, developing healthier ways to seek connection, building a support network that didn't rely on crisis. She'd found part-time work at a local bookstore, something that forced her into regular social interaction outside their relationship. She joined a writing group, started submitting essays to small literary magazines. She was learning to exist as a full person rather than as someone defined by need. Ethan watched this transformation with complicated emotions. Part of him recognized the courage it took to dismantle defense mechanisms built over years. Part of him remained guarded, uncertain whether trust could ever be fully restored. And part of him grieved the year they'd lost to deception, the relationship that might have been if she'd been honest from the start. "I think I understand something now," Lenara said one evening as they shared coffee at a neutral location, a cafe neither of them had been to before, testing whether normalcy was possible. I wanted you to need me because I didn't think you could just want me. Want me as I actually am, without the drama or the crisis or the obligation. That felt impossible. Like I wasn't enough on my own. It wasn't impossible, Ethan replied. But you never gave me the chance to find out. You decided for both of us what I could handle, what I would accept. I know, she said quietly. I robbed you of choice. And I robbed myself of the chance to be chosen for real. So what happens now? He asked, genuinely uncertain. I don't know, Lenara admitted. Dr. Winters says I need to be comfortable being alone before I can be healthy in relationship. That I need to prove to myself I'm enough without someone else validating it. But I also know that I want to try to be the person who deserves your trust, even if I never fully earn it back. Ethan considered this. The rational part of him, the analytical mind that had identified the patterns, counseled caution. This was someone who'd proven capable of elaborate, sustained deception. Could people really change that fundamentally? But he'd also seen her genuine effort. The vulnerability it took to attend therapy sessions where she was consistently confronted with uncomfortable truths. The way she'd started taking accountability without deflection, without the victim narratives that had previously defined her self-concept. I think we need time, he said finally. Separate time. You need to build a life that doesn't revolve around me, and I need to rebuild my sense of reality without constantly questioning what's true. If there's something real between us, it'll survive the distance. If there's not, then at least we'll know honestly, Lenara finished. They spent the next 6 months apart. Not entirely no contact, they'd text occasionally, brief updates that maintained connection without dependency. Ethan threw himself into work, accepting the promotion that required occasional travel. He reconnected with friends he'd neglected, took up rock climbing, rediscovered parts of himself that had been subsumed into caretaking. His therapist helped him process not just the betrayal but his own role in the dynamic. You have a rescuer tendency, Dr. Santos observed during one session. Your father's death left you with this sense that you need to save people, to prevent loss through hypervigilance and care. Lenara's need felt familiar, even comfortable in some ways. So I enabled it, Ethan said. You responded to what you were shown, Dr. Santos corrected. But you're right that examining your own patterns is important. Otherwise you'll find yourself in similar dynamics again. Lenara, meanwhile, was building something resembling a genuine life. Her essays started getting accepted, small publications, but real ones. She developed friendships in the writing group, relationships based on shared interests rather than caregiving. She spent weekends hiking with a group from the bookstore, learning that her body could be strong rather than fragile. One evening, she called Ethan. Not because of crisis, but because she'd sold her first essay to a paying market and wanted to share the news. That's amazing, he said, genuine warmth in his voice. What's it about? Complicated things, she replied. Shame, growth, the gap between who we are and who we present. Honestly, it's probably therapeutic more than literary, but someone wanted to pay for it. That's still worth celebrating. I'm learning to celebrate small things, Lenara said. Wins that don't require an audience or validation. It's harder than I thought. Most worthwhile things are. After they hung up, Ethan realized the conversation had felt different. Not weighted with unspoken need or crisis. Just two people sharing news, the way healthy relationships functioned. 7 months after their separation, they met for dinner, not the cafe, but an actual restaurant. Somewhere that required planning and intention. Lenara looked different. Not physically, though she'd clearly been taking care of herself, exercise, proper sleep, the glow of someone not chronically manufacturing illness. But her energy felt different. Less desperate, more centered. You seem good, Ethan observed. I am good, she said, seeming surprised by her own certainty. Not perfect. I still have anxious days where I want to spiral into old patterns. But Dr. Winters taught me to sit with discomfort instead of manufacturing crisis to resolve it. That must be hard. It's excruciating, Lenara admitted with a wry smile. Turns out feeling your actual feelings is much worse than creating fake emergencies. Who knew? They talked for 2 hours, about her work, his promotion, a book they'd both read, politics, nothing heavy. It felt almost normal. Almost like two people who might actually work together without dysfunction. I don't know if we can get back what we had, Ethan said eventually, addressing the unspoken question hovering over the evening. Because what we had was built on false premises. I know, Lenara agreed. I think about that a lot. Whether we're trying to resurrect something that was never real or whether we're building something new. Maybe both, Ethan suggested. Maybe some of it was real, the parts where we talked about books and ideas, the comfortable silences, the actual connection. And maybe we can build on those parts while leaving the rest behind. With boundaries, Lenara added. Real ones. The kind I can't manipulate. Firm boundaries, Ethan confirmed. If you feel yourself slipping into old patterns, you tell me immediately. If I notice concerning behavior, I bring it up directly. No more polite silence or benefit of the doubt. Just honest, sometimes uncomfortable conversation. I can do that, Lenara said. I want to do that. They didn't reconcile immediately. Instead, they rebuilt slowly, weekly dinners that sometimes went well and sometimes felt forced. Therapy sessions, both individual and occasional joint ones where Dr. Winters facilitated difficult conversations. Boundaries that Ethan maintained even when Lenara's old patterns threatened to resurface. There was a setback 3 months in. Lenara called late at night, her voice shaky. I feel awful. Dizzy and weak. I think I need to go to the hospital. Ethan's first instinct was the old pattern, jump in the car, rush to her side, take control. Instead, he took a breath. Have you called Dr. Winters? He asked calmly. It's midnight. I don't want to bother her. Call the emergency line, Ethan said firmly. If it's genuinely medical, you need professional assessment. If it's anxiety, she can help you work through it. But I'm not going to enable the old pattern by rushing over. The silence on the other end was heavy. Then, quietly, you're right. I'm sorry. I felt scared and lonely and I defaulted to what used to work. I know, Ethan said, his voice gentler. But we have to break that cycle. Can you call Dr. Winters? Yeah. I will. Thank you for not just doing what I expected. She called him back an hour later. Dr. Winters helped me work through it. It was a panic attack, not medical. I'm okay. And I'm proud of you for holding the boundary. Those moments, the ones where new patterns replaced old ones, gradually built something resembling trust. Not naive trust, but informed trust. Trust based on consistent behavior rather than assumptions. Lenara became genuinely devoted to the relationship, but in a different way. Not the desperate, manufactured dependency of before, but the steady commitment of someone who showed up authentically. She learned that genuine devotion meant showing up for Ethan's needs too, celebrating his work wins, supporting him through his own struggles, being present without requiring crisis to justify the attention. And Ethan learned that love didn't require perfection or martyrdom. That healthy partnership meant two people supporting each other from positions of strength rather than need. Months later, when Lenara moved back into the apartment they'd once shared, slowly, one box at a time, with clear agreements about finances and space, it felt different. Not lighter necessarily, but more honest. They'd both learned that the strongest foundations weren't built on need or guilt, but on the difficult, unglamorous work of showing up as real people, complicated, imperfect, trying. One evening, as they cooked dinner together in a kitchen that felt both familiar and new, Lenara paused mid-chop. Can I tell you something? Always, Ethan replied, stirring pasta. I'm grateful you caught me, she said quietly. I know that sounds strange, but if you hadn't noticed the patterns, hadn't confronted me, I'd still be living that half-life. Manufacturing crises, never feeling genuinely secure, always terrified of being seen. This is harder, but it's real. And real is worth the difficulty. Ethan set down the spoon, turning to face her. I'm grateful you were willing to do the work. A lot of people would have just, defensive or disappeared. You stayed and faced it. We both did, Lenara corrected. You stayed when you had every reason to leave. That means something. They stood in the kitchen, neither quite sure what happened next but willing to find out together. The story didn't end with perfect resolution or dramatic declarations. It ended with two flawed people choosing each other with open eyes, building something sustainable rather than dramatic, learning that the strongest love was the kind that survived truth rather than requiring deception. And sometimes, that was enough.